I watched her stir cream into her coffee like she didn't just burn the bridge we were both standing on. The little silver spoon clinked softly against porcelain. Perfect circles. No rush. No flinch. Like the sentence she had dropped 5 minutes earlier, wasn't currently causing my jaw to lock tight enough to crack a tooth. Everyone else at the table had already moved on. They were back to their seafood towers and strategic alliances and laughter that sounded like applause with no audience. But I was still sitting in the rubble of what she'd said. Some marriages are more symbolic than functional, she'd said. And she looked at me when she said it, not past me, not through me, at me. And she smiled, not cruel, not apologetic either. That neutral smile you give someone on an elevator when you're both pretending the silence isn't weird. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because her hand went right back to the coffee cup, like I wasn't real anymore. Like I was a coworker she barely tolerated. Like I was already gone and this dinner was just paperwork. 12 minutes earlier, the waiter had refilled my water glass. That's how recent this is. I remember every drop because I've spent the last year watching everything, reading her silences like a language, learning to speak fluent tension. You know how sometimes a dog just knows when its owner is about to leave the house without it? No words, no shoes, just energy. That was me for months. So, when the invitation came for this dinner, hand-picked guests, founders, investors, brand partners, I was surprised to see my name on the RSVP. I wasn't in the business. I wasn't in any business, really, not since I left mine behind. She'd said it would be good for optics. I didn't ask whose. Let me be clear. I wasn't always this pathetic. I had a spine once. I ran things. I built things. I made hard decisions without blinking. But marriage, it's like wind erosion. One gust doesn't change the mountain. But over time, yeah, it becomes a canyon. She ordered oysters. I hate oysters. Always have. But I ate one anyway. I didn't gag. That was my little victory. I told myself, if you can stomach this, you can survive anything. But when she said that sentence, that one perfect surgical sentence, it wasn't just meant for the table. It was meant to end the illusion. And that's what made me stand. That's what made me leave my phone, my jacket, even my car keys sitting right there on the white linen tablecloth, like I was just going to the bathroom. I didn't need any of it, because suddenly, for the first time in nearly a year, my hands weren't shaking. I didn't know where I was walking. The air outside felt like a different season than it had 10 minutes earlier. That fake spring warmth had snapped into something brittle and cold, like even the night knew something had shifted. I didn't check my phone. I didn't even look back through the restaurant window. I couldn't. I was afraid I'd see her laughing, not in a sinister way, just naturally, the way people laugh when they're finally free from a weight they've been carrying too long. I walked 2 blocks, then 4. Then somewhere around block 7, I realized I had no keys, no phone, and, ironically, no ID to prove who I even was anymore. It felt symbolic, like I'd been erased and left behind, sitting between the oysters and the creme brulee. I ducked into a hotel lobby just to sit down. The doorman gave me a polite nod like I belonged there. That was kinda nice. For a moment, I felt like a ghost in a nice suit. Then I caught my reflection in the wall-length mirror near the elevators. My collar was crooked, my eyes were red, and I looked like a man who'd just been told his lease on reality was up. It didn't hit me all at once. It came in fragments. The way she'd taken 2 steps ahead of me walking into the restaurant. The way she never touched my arm. Not once, not even as a formality. The subtle shift in her voice when introducing me. She didn't say, "my husband," she said, "this is Merton." No title, no possessive warmth. Just a name, like a placeholder. And that damn sentence still echoed in my head. Some marriages are more symbolic than functional. She delivered it like a marketing tagline, like she'd been waiting to say it in the right setting, with the right lighting and the right audience too. Witness the moment of detachment. I tried to remember the last time she said something soft to me that didn't have a transactional rhythm to it. Can you get oat milk next time? Did you submit the insurance form? Don't forget my mom's birthday call. Functional. Always functional. And maybe symbolic too, because we looked like a couple. We acted like one. But I can't remember the last time I felt like someone's person. I sat in that hotel lobby for 40 minutes before a concierge finally asked if I needed anything. I told him I left my car keys in a restaurant, but didn't want to go back. He offered to call me a car. I smiled and said, "No thanks, I'm kind of trying to avoid people who know where I live." He didn't laugh. I don't blame him. Eventually, I got up and walked another mile, found a diner still open, ordered eggs I didn't want, and toast I couldn't eat. I just needed to be somewhere where a plate would land in front of me and no one would ask why my hands were trembling again. And while I sat there pretending to eat, a thought hit me hard enough to knock the air out of my lungs. What if she planned that sentence, not out of cruelty, not even to punish me, but because she knew I wouldn't say anything, because she knew I'd leave, because she'd learned how to make me disappear without asking me to go. And the worst part, it worked. I didn't expect her to be home when I got back. I don't know why. Maybe part of me thought she'd be out celebrating some unspoken victory. Maybe I thought she'd be at someone else's place. Or maybe I just hoped I wouldn't have to see her so I could pretend the night hadn't really happened. But the lights were on, the porch light too. That was the first weird thing. We never leave the porch light on. She says it looks too desperate, like we're begging someone to visit. The house smelled like lemongrass. She must have lit one of those boutique candles her sister gave her last Christmas, the ones she said she was saving for a special mood. So, what was tonight? Celebration, transition, burial? She was in the kitchen, still in the green dress, still flawless. She didn't look up when I came in, just said, "Hey," like I'd returned from grabbing milk. Her laptop was open on the counter, some spreadsheet glowing on the screen, and next to it, 2 plates. 2. Like she'd expected me to come back and eat with her. There was fish, asparagus, even a tiny bowl of aioli, like we were on some reality cooking show. The timing was too perfect. "You made dinner?" I asked. My voice sounded like it came from behind glass. She didn't answer that question, just looked over her shoulder and said, "I figured you wouldn't want to talk at the restaurant. I didn't mean to drop that on you so hard." Drop what exactly? I wanted to ask, but I was too busy trying to understand what reality I was standing in. Because this version of her, calm, considerate, casually preparing fish at 11:40 p.m. after a torpedo dinner party, didn't match the woman who'd used our marriage as a punchline just hours ago. I sat down, not because I forgave her or even wanted to be near her, but because I needed to know where this was going. And she looked at me like I'd finally arrived at a meeting I'd been avoiding for years. "I know you felt it too," she said. "We've been fading for a long time. I just didn't want to be the only one to admit it." I didn't respond, because no matter how hard I searched my memory, I couldn't find the day we started fading. To me, it felt more like someone turned the volume down gradually until I couldn't hear the music anymore. But she'd clearly been keeping track, maybe even counting the days. Then she hit me with it. "I've been offered a 6-month position in Lion, brand development lead. It's what I've been pushing for, and I accepted it last week." Lion, France. That wasn't just a job. That was migration. That was escape disguised as opportunity. I stared at the fish on my plate. Perfectly seared, perfectly plated, perfectly staged. Like everything in our lives had been, curated for appearances, hollow behind the glass. I should have asked the obvious. When were you going to tell me? What about us? What happens now? But instead, I said the most pitiful, self-aware thing I've ever said in my life. "Do you even need me to come with you?" She didn't blink. "Number? I don't think you'd like it there." The food was still warm. The air was still filled with that fake citrus candle glow. And I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was a send-off. And I wasn't the one being invited. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I lay in bed with my eyes open while she snored. Yes, snored, softly beside me, like she hadn't just detonated our marriage with a smile and a plane ticket. I remember staring at the ceiling fan, letting the whir of the blades hypnotize me, because it was the only thing that sounded honest in that room. Even the mattress felt like it was pretending. Sometime around 5 a.m., I got up. Quietly. The kind of quiet you learn from walking on eggshells for years. I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I couldn't be in that bed anymore. I ended up in the kitchen, still dark outside. The lemongrass candle burned down to a waxy crater. The fish was still in the trash, uneaten, like the whole dinner had been a performance and we were just actors playing out our final scene. Her laptop was still on the counter, still open, still glowing. Now, look, I'm not proud of what I did next. I'm not one of those guys who checks texts or stalks social media accounts. I've never felt the need, but something about that laptop, it felt incomplete, like a book she'd left open to a bookmarked chapter, and I was the only one who didn't know the ending. And besides, she'd already checked out. Morally, we weren't in the same room anymore. I tapped the touchpad. The screen blinked awake. No password prompt, just a minimized folder in the corner titled simply March. That's all. Not work, not campaign files, not lion planning. Just a month. One word, one breadcrumb. I clicked it. Inside were 22 files, mostly PDFs and images. But the first thing I noticed, they weren't business related. They were personal, and not personal in a way that made sense. I'm talking pictures of her at hotels I didn't recognize, screenshots of chat logs from an encrypted app I'd never seen, and receipts. So many receipts. One in particular stopped me cold. A dinner reservation. 2 weeks ago. 4/2. At a hotel rooftop restaurant in Atlanta. She was supposed to be in Baltimore that night. I even remembered texting her when she got back. How was the conference? And she replied, boring, same old faces. I opened the next file. It was a scanned receipt for room service. 2 entrees, 2 desserts, champagne. Not unusual for a work trip, until I saw the note at the bottom. Happy 1 year. Written in pen, in her handwriting. 1 year, my mind split in two. Half of it tried to rationalize. Maybe it was for a colleague, maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was misreading everything. The other half saw it all at once. The late nights, the polite distance. The way she stopped asking me how my day was. She wasn't bored of me. She'd already replaced me. I scrolled further, chat screenshots with someone saved as H. The tone wasn't flirty. It was intimate. It read like a second marriage. They weren't just texting. They were building something, planning, syncing calendars, discussing flights. There were inside jokes, code names, references to me. The house plant, she called me once. Said I just needed water and wasn't hard to ignore. I wish I could say I felt rage, but what I felt was worse. I felt small, quiet, like someone had turned the volume down on my existence. Then I made a mistake, a real one. I opened a file labeled July Letter. It was a Word document, only 4 paragraphs long. But those 4 paragraphs were her goodbye, her plan, her exit. She'd written it like a professional resignation, calm, clinical, structured. She said I was a good man, but not a growth partner. She said she tried to outgrow her guilt, but eventually decided it was easier to dissolve than to renovate. Dissolve, like a pill, like something to swallow and forget. I stared at that word for a long time. Then I heard the floor creak behind me. She was standing there, barefoot, hair messy, arms crossed, like she'd rehearsed this moment too. But she didn't scream, didn't snatch the laptop, didn't even act surprised. All she said was, "I was hoping you'd see it on your own." And then she walked away, like she'd just dropped a glass and decided not to pick up the pieces. The funny thing about pain is how it waits. You expect it to hit you like a truck, sudden, catastrophic, irreversible. But in truth, it lingers just out of reach at first, like a hand over your shoulder, waiting for you to notice. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even ask her why. I just closed the laptop, stood up, and left the kitchen. I went to the garage, not to run, not to pack, but to find the storage bins. I pulled out the old Christmas box, the one labeled Decor, Not Outdoor, and I opened it. Underneath the tangled lights and dusty garland was a small fireproof box where we kept our important documents: passports, marriage license, car title, tax records. I carried it to the kitchen and placed it on the table like an offering. She came back 15 minutes later, fully dressed, keys in hand. "I'm going to my sister's," she said, without making eye contact. "I'll come back tomorrow to talk." I nodded. Then I slid the fireproof box toward her. "Take what you need." That stopped her. She stared at it, like she wasn't sure if it was a threat or an act of kindness. Maybe it was both. I wasn't even sure anymore. She didn't open it, just stood there, one hand still wrapped around the strap of her purse, the other loosely clutching her phone like a talisman. "Merton," she started, and I flinched at how soft my name sounded in her voice. I used to love that sound. I didn't want it to be like this. But the truth was, she did. She just didn't want to feel bad about it being like this. I should have said something profound or bitter, something that would hang in the air like smoke. But all I said was, "Leave the key." She hesitated, then pulled her house key off her chain and placed it next to the candle stub on the counter. The same counter where I found her digital confessions. The same place we'd laughed while carving pumpkins 3 Octobers ago. Everything had layers now. Nothing was just itself anymore. When the door finally closed behind her, the house felt unreal. Like I was standing inside a replica of my own life. Same walls, same furniture, but none of it felt like mine anymore. I walked around slowly, letting my fingers skim surfaces. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad. I was evaluating. Studying the bones of a house I used to live in. A relationship I thought I understood. Then I did something petty, maybe the pettiest thing I've ever done. I opened every drawer in the house and emptied them onto the floor. Not violently, methodically, one by one. I wanted to see the mess. I wanted the chaos to match what was happening inside me. I didn't break anything. I didn't tear anything. I just opened, dumped, moved on. Her makeup drawer, the junk drawer, the drawer where we kept extra keys that no longer opened anything meaningful. Then I found the drawer with the letters. Not emails, not typed notes, actual handwritten letters from him, tied together with a black ribbon like some kind of twisted romantic keepsake. She'd kept them in a box labeled Old Poetry. I untied the ribbon and read the first one. It started with her name, not Aveline. Avenue. He called her Ava. Something about that crushed me more than the lion letter, more than the anniversary receipt, more than the snide comments in their private chat logs. Ava was the name she only ever used when we traveled. It was her vacation name, her alias for hotel reservations and fake stories told to strangers on planes. And now it belonged to him. She'd given him that version of herself, the one I thought was reserved for us. The playful, liberated version, the one not weighed down by bills or routine or dog food reminders. I didn't finish the letter. I put it back in the box, retied the ribbon, and placed it on her side of the bed. Then I made coffee. Real, strong, bitter coffee. Not because I needed to stay awake, but because I wanted the morning to feel different. I didn't sleep that night either. I didn't even try. At some point around 3:30 in the morning, I turned off all the lights in the house. Not to rest, to listen. I sat in the hallway outside the bedroom, back against the wall, knees pulled in like I was 15 again, and grounded for something I didn't do. The house made small noises, refrigerator hum, occasional groan from the pipes, the buzz of a motion light catching wind outside, but mostly it was silent, the kind of silence that feels more like pressure than absence. The letters were still on her side of the bed. I hadn't moved them, neither had she. Her key was still where she'd left it. Her toothbrush was still in the bathroom, but her scent had started to disappear from the sheets, like even that was deciding it no longer belonged here. I sat in that silence, phone in hand, not doing anything, just staring at the screen like it owed me an answer. And then, around 4:17 a.m., the notification popped up. "H, you awake?" The message had come through the encrypted app. She hadn't logged out, hadn't cleared the session. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Instead, I just stared at it, the glowing little bubble that confirmed, without any remaining doubt, that he had no idea she wasn't alone in this anymore. Another message followed. "Just saw your flight. Can't sleep now." He added a heart emoji, small, red, mocking. I clicked the message before I could think about the consequences. My heart was pounding in a very specific way. Not with fear, not with anger, but with clarity. I knew I was doing something irreversible. And then I typed, "Yeah, I'm awake." Seconds passed, then more typing bubbles from his side. "I miss you. I keep thinking about Atlanta. I keep thinking about the way you looked when you said you weren't going back." I read it 5 times. My fingers hovered over the screen. The temptation to unleash hell surged through me, to tell him who I was, to describe the kitchen, the letters, the half-eaten dinner. But something in me pulled back. Rage wasn't power. Control was. So I responded, "I can't talk long." Things are getting complicated. The typing bubbles popped up instantly. "What's wrong? Did he say something? Do I need to book something early?" He was spiraling. I leaned back against the wall, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because I'd won anything, but because I realized something he hadn't. He was more afraid of me than I was of him. This wasn't just an affair, this was a backup life. He wanted her clean, untangled. He didn't want baggage, he wanted an escape fantasy. And now that reality was creeping in through the door she never locked behind her, he was cracking. I waited 7 minutes, then typed again. I'll call you tomorrow. Don't message for now. It's not safe. 3 dots, then a pause. Then, okay, I trust you. I nearly dropped the phone, not because of what he said, but because it confirmed everything. This wasn't a fling. This was a second reality she'd been building, brick by brick, word by word, in parallel with our life. And he wasn't some smooth-talking homewrecker. He was invested, committed, willing to jump ship the second she gave the signal. I placed the phone screen down on the floor beside me and stared at the front door, waiting to see if I still recognized the shape of my own future. Because now, I had a new problem. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to take it all back. But I had no idea how far she'd gone. And I was starting to suspect that neither did she. The next morning, I brewed coffee like nothing had happened, because that's what you do when you've got nothing else left to anchor the day. I drank it slowly at the kitchen table, across from the empty seat where she used to scroll through emails while chewing half a croissant like she was too busy to be hungry. I watched the sun crawl across the tile floor and thought about how some mornings feel like apologies and others like threats. Then I opened her laptop again. I wasn't looking for more love letters. I wasn't even trying to find the end of her lies. I already knew where her story ended, in a different country, with a different man, wearing a different version of herself. What I wanted now was simple, him, not H, not the polished backlit version she had in those screenshots. I wanted to know who this man really was when he wasn't whispering between encrypted lines. It didn't take long. Her saved conversations had just enough details, a company name, a couple of calendar invites, a photo from a shared workspace with a visible logo behind his chair. He wasn't careful. Most men like that never are. They count on charm to clean up the trail. They think passwords are enough. They assume people like me don't dig, but I do. And I did. His name was Holden Ellery, 41, founder of a boutique consultancy in New York, specializing in emotional design systems, whatever that means. I found interviews, panel clips, podcast appearances. He had the voice of someone who always got his way, low and confident, like even his hesitations were part of the plan. But something felt off. Everything about his public presence was too clean. No mentions of family, no long-term business partners. His past seemed manicured, the digital equivalent of walking into a house with no personal items, just hotel furniture and stage smiles. I started digging deeper. Through archived articles, old Reddit posts under his email, employment databases, anything that left a fingerprint. And that's when I found something. It was small, a brief mention in a defunct industry blog from 2017. Just one sentence. Holden Ellery, formerly Holden Bryce, who abruptly left Synform Labs following an internal ethics review. I froze. Bryce? Why change your last name unless you're hiding something? Synform Labs was a human-centered AI research firm that collapsed after a whistleblower scandal involving misused behavioral data. I remembered the headlines vaguely. Something about manipulating user feedback loops to create emotional dependency in app users. At the time, it was brushed off as a fringe tech controversy. But he was in it, at the center. A lead designer on the UX team that got accused of psychologically nudging users toward addictive behavior. And now he was whispering promises to my wife, posing as some emotionally fluent visionary. He wasn't a lover. He was a manipulator by trade. I stood up from the table, heart pounding not with rage, but clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a con, a quiet, elegant one. One where she wasn't just a willing participant. She was the product being sold a story. And maybe she didn't even realize it. I started printing everything, screenshots, articles, cached pages. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but it felt like building a raft in a rising flood. I needed evidence, not just for me, maybe for her too. Maybe she needed to see it. Maybe she thought she was walking toward freedom, not into the hands of someone who'd already hollowed out others before her. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no caller ID. I answered without speaking. There was a pause, then a voice. His voice, calm, familiar. "I think it's time we talked, Merton." I didn't answer right away. There was something in his voice, not fear, not anger, something colder, measured. The kind of tone you only hear from someone who's never been told no long enough to forget what it sounds like. He didn't ask if I was listening. He just assumed I was. And I was. "I know you've seen the messages," he said, "and the files. I also know you haven't told her yet." He was right. I hadn't. Aveline was still at her sister's, still quiet, still gone without being fully gone. There were no calls, no apologies, no explanations. Just silence, like she was giving me space while preparing to vanish. Holden kept talking, calm, rehearsed. "I'm not the villain here," he said. "What you saw, it's complicated, but it was honest. She's not happy. You know that. You've known it longer than she has." He was good. He didn't threaten. He empathized. He offered the illusion of shared understanding, the worst kind of manipulation, the one that pretends to be mercy. "Are you done?" I asked. That caught him off guard. He paused. I imagined him sitting in some polished apartment, barefoot, smug, already planning his next pivot. "I just thought," he said slowly, "we might avoid turning this into something it doesn't need to be." That was it. That was his play. No violence, no scandal. Just the slow suffocation of any resistance. He wanted me to fade out quietly so he could have her guilt-free. I didn't argue. I didn't warn. I just hung up. And then I deleted everything. The screenshots, the chat logs, the articles, every saved file, every cache folder, every trace of his name from her device and mine. Because here's what I realized, finally, painfully, clearly. I didn't want to win. I didn't want to drag her back or burn it all down or hand her a dossier like I was some spurned private investigator. I wanted peace, real peace. So I wrote a letter, a real one, pen and paper, no drama, no accusations, just honesty. I told her I loved her once, and that mattered. I told her I deserved more than a quiet replacement. I told her I didn't forgive the betrayal, but I forgave her. Because I wasn't going to let his voice be the one that echoed in my head for the rest of my life. I told her she could go to Lion, or Mars, or wherever she wanted, and I told her I wouldn't be waiting. I left the letter on the kitchen table, next to the key she gave back, and I walked out of the house we both abandoned long before we realized it. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've moved into a tiny apartment with creaky floors and neighbors who leave loud voicemails on speakerphone. I bought mismatched dishes. I walk more. I sleep better. Sometimes I even laugh at things that aren't sad. And one morning, just last week, I opened the door to a package. No return address. Inside was a photograph of the Alps. Nothing written on it. Just the image. Cold, distant, beautiful. Like someone sending a final page of a chapter that didn't need words. I put it in a drawer. I didn't need closure. I already had it. Because here's the truth. No one tells you. When someone tries to write you out of your own life story, you don't have to fight for your part. You just start a new one.